How are you guys doing? Firstly, thank you for attending this talk. I would appreciate it if few people actually came to this one, and most of you went to some of the other talks. It would have made it a bit of an easier time for me to get through this nightmare of discussion. It's been a hard road trying to prepare a talk that was hopefully going to be meaningful to the diverse people that I've got in the crowd. So just rough show of hands, developers in the room? The majority of you. IT engineers? Yeah, handful of guys. Managers? There's a few of you. Okay, so you guys are going to love this talk because we're going to bash the hell out of the managers in the organizations that you work for. I'm going to take you through a couple of stories today. I think I'm going to need interaction from you. It's the only way that I know how to work. If you think of something, if I'm not clear on a point, shout it out. Scream at me, put your hand up. I'd love to be able to hear your questions as I'm going along. So don't be afraid to interrupt me at all. Let's ask you guys a quick question to get the blood flowing. So how many of you think you work for a great company? Now tell the truth. How many of you are sitting next to your manager? Not all the Terrifico people are being honest here. Yeah. So some of the themes that I'm going to take you guys through today are going to maybe reflect on your organization. They'll probably reflect on the organization that I come from as well. You may identify some instances where you've made similar mistakes. It's not always nice to hear or to reflect on these types of difficulties, but it's not intended to be a painful exercise. My main focus is to make us learn from these types of lessons and hopefully share with you what my take on some of the lessons I've learned through these stories has been. I want to make sure that I focus on the things that have made people and companies great. I'm going to look back on history into the ancient Roman times. I'm going to be focusing on some of the tech giants as we go along. But more importantly, this talk is actually meant to point out to you that you are the important cog that makes technology work. You are the people that make things function, that turn average and good technology into great technology. Now, while I'm going to turn my attention to some of the greats, I'm also going to focus on some of the not-so-greats. And while I look at the greats, I'm also going to focus on the people around them rather than just their stories. I'm going to try and make sure that you understand how they've created these platforms, and the people around them have created the platform for these people to soar. I hope to ignite your thoughts on the long drive home. How many of you are from Johannesburg here? Quite a few people, okay. So I'm hoping to ignite your thoughts on your long drive home this evening on a few things. So firstly, just diversity. It being an important cog in creating a culture that allows technology to thrive. Openness, culture, and of course, the thing that underpins it all, people. That's all of you in the room today. Anybody have an Android device here? Hands up. Okay, cool, quite a few of you. Steve's watching. We're going to start with the obvious tale that almost everybody goes into. So Steve, as his friends call him, had this plan for a company that Apple had recently purchased. It was going to be one of the greatest hardware companies in the world. They had cutting-edge technology. They were pushing the frontiers with their ability to combine hardware that was used for the medical and design industries. This, however, wasn't to be their fate. Though Jobs thought that they should be pushing their hardware, the company couldn't seem to make a go of it. He even considered selling the company to their biggest rival at the time, Microsoft, just to recoup some of the cash that they'd lost over this period. This, however, never came to be either, because the people around him pushed Steve, as his friends call him, down the path of allowing him to create a full-length animated feature film. They stood up for what they believed in, and they focused their energy on the one enterprise that they thought was going to make them a meaningful organization. The movie was called Toy Story. To Infinity and Beyond. How many of you have watched that movie? Okay, geez, I'm not as old as I thought I was. Ed Catmull and John Lasseter were the two co-founders of Pixar. They convinced Jobs to allow them to pursue this project, despite Steve's belief that they should be a hardware company. The rest is history. $7.4 billion payday for Apple. Now, some of us can probably relate to Ed and John. We've all had ideas that we fully believe in, ideas that we want to drive in our organizations. And some of us can relate to Steve. We've all had ideas pitched to us, things that we think should happen, but somebody's got a different plan. The real lesson here was that both of them were right. Steve believed strongly in their ability to become a successful hardware company. Ed and John believed that the feature films that they were to produce would be their future. Like I said, they were both right. Their blockbuster films paved the way for the rendering hardware of today. It revolutionized the animation industry and forever changed the way that hardware is farmed to render mind-blowing imagery. Now, there are two lessons that I take away from this story. As a leader, it's your responsibility to put faith in your people, like Steve did with John and Ed. As an employee, it is also your responsibility to have faith in your idea and in your leadership to support you, even though you might not always agree. As it's your choice to belong to an organization, the only way to make that choice work for you is to make it the environment that you want it to be. Contribute to the culture. Create a workplace culture where ideas can be heard and will be supported regardless of your title. Leverage the expertise of people around you to help you and your company forge new avenues, like Ed and John did with Steve, as his friends called him. In this instance, Ed and John did just that by pushing their idea, even though it didn't align with Steve's, as his friends called him. Steve, on the other hand, put his faith in Ed and John, and the rest, as I said, is history. History that continues to make itself, Pixar being one of the most successful animation studios in the world. They lived the culture they wanted to be a part of, and in so doing, formed a revolutionary organization, a company that leads the animation industry today. This reminds me of a story of mine. Not that I created an animation studio, I didn't do that at all. I worked as a developer at a software development company in Durban. But many years ago, while working as a developer at Terrifico, I stumbled on an idea to diversify our product offering. We decided to break our massive monolith of a product into bite-sized chunks. This required that we created an API that was used to allow these bite-sized chunks to integrate into any back-end platform. I believed that our industry was heading in this direction in years to come, and we needed to get ahead of that curve. But how do I push the idea? I struggled with trying to figure out how I made this a reality. I had to live our culture and let the people that surrounded me breathe life into this idea. I took the plunge and started discussing it with our head of department at the time. Much to my surprise, he agreed that we could spend a few evenings whiteboarding it, scribbling ideas down on the board, trying to figure out if we could make this work and if we could build a new avenue for our organization. We canvassed people from around the company just to make sure that we covered every hole. We took every lesson that they taught us, we made sure that we closed it, and in so doing, we formed a really solid plan. We worked hard on the idea, did it in our own time, with many people around us helping us through that space. We were ready to take it further. I then went to the executive that was in charge of the area that we both belonged to and asked for him to back us with a small team of 4 people. He then took the idea to the other executives to try and persuade them to get us the time. Even though they were skeptical, they agreed. And today, we have another business vertical that runs in excess of 20% of our overall revenue for our customers. It has also resulted in 250 new people joining our lovely organization. We were allowed this opportunity regardless of the fact that those in charge back then had a different plan for our focus. We didn't align, yet we were successful despite it. The companies that I've worked for in the past have really created this type of environment. I was lucky to belong to a company where this was possible. I hear they have a great new CEO. For those of you that have put your hands up at the beginning of this talk, to the question that I asked you about how great your organization is, I think you'll recognize some of these traits. But for those of you that didn't, I hope that these lessons find their way into your world at some point. But I do want you to know, manager and employee alike, the responsibility is equally yours. It is your responsibility to create an environment that you want in your organization. This type of open and supportive culture that places people first will always make initiatives like the one undertaken by Ed, John, and Steve, as his friends call him. Thank you. made a possibility. This story of mine reminded me of another at Apple. Sorry, droiders, last one, I promise. This is Donna Divinsky. Donna was the distribution and sales manager for Apple in 1985. Who knew they were that old, but they were. A position that placed her 3 levels below Steve Jobs. At the time, Steve came up with a new idea to change their distribution model. It was a just-in-time system that would allow for machines to be built when they're ordered, as opposed to requisitioning stock, keeping it in warehouses, and building them upon demand. He proposed eliminating all 6 of their US-based warehouses and dropped all their inventory. He believed the just-in-time proposal would be more effective at keeping up with the demand that they were seeing. Divinsky disagreed. Distribution was working fine. They had next to 0 complaints. However, her objections were overruled. So she was assigned to a task force to evaluate Jobs' proposal. At the final meeting, everyone was asked by her boss's boss whether they agreed with Steve's take, and the majority of them did. Donna, however, thought it was time for her to speak up. She disagreed. And though she was in the minority, she still spoke up. She decided to confront the chairman of the board, back then, Steve, as his friends call him. She met with her boss's boss and demanded 30 days to work on a counter-proposal, or she would leave Apple. Her proposal consolidated the customer support centers around the country, and in turn, got some of the desired benefits that Steve wanted with his just-in-time model, without the drawbacks. Shortly after that, she was promoted. After she was promoted, there was a new award that came about at Apple by the employees of Apple. It was an award awarded to the person that challenged Jobs the most every year. Now, this sounds like I'm advocating threatening your manager if you don't get your way. Yeah. It's exactly the opposite. The thing to pay attention to is that Donna stood up for what she believed in, and her belief was in the best interest of Apple, not herself. She had done so after she had earned a reputation for delivery, and she has been committed to Apple for a large number of years. This is the part to being heard. Make sure that you're committed to your idea and your organization, and you will get the support that you require. The part to finding the support you need is via that route that Donna has shown us. Equally, Jobs had a disagreeable personality. It made it easy for people to disagree with him as a result, without repercussion. This type of culture and environment is responsible for all involved. This type of culture and environment is the responsibility of all involved. Where people speak up and are rewarded because of it. Leaders need to allow people to disagree with their direction in a safe manner. While everyone needs to prove their commitment before their ideas may see the light of day, these are the lessons that Donna taught us. So we're going to head a little bit back in time now to the Battle of Carhae, the first triumvirate. This story takes us back to the ancient Roman Empire. The triumvirate was made up of Pompey, Caesar, and Crassus. Crassus, being the least experienced in warfare, was more of a businessman and a loan shark. However, the 3 settled on an informal alliance to keep control of the Roman Empire. A positive lesson for good business, but not the lesson I want to point out. Back to the story. Crassus was in control of Syria, a region on the eastern frontier. This neighborhood in the Parthian Empire, which Crassus saw as an opportunity for him to be seen as an equal to Pompey and Caesar, both of which, as I've mentioned, were experienced war generals. He set forth with 43,000 soldiers, many of whom were infantry. Infantry being one of the strengths of the Roman Empire back then. They used it quite effectively in battle. They would charge ahead into any battle and very quickly overcome the opposing side with close combat. On their journey, instead of heeding the advice of his officers, Crassus decided to take the route through Armenia. Crassus decided not to take the route through Armenia, which would have added 40,000 additional troops to his army, along with food, water, and other supplies. He opted, instead, for going through the desert of Mesopotamia, as he was eager to have his victory. His impatience would prove a costly mistake. His men were weary from days of walking through the hot desert. His officers advised that they camp for the night and scout the enemy before attempting an assault. However, Crassus cut the much-needed water break short and ordered his men forward. He ignored the advice of the people around him, many of whom were more experienced than him in military engagements. Crassus advanced a long line of infantry with the cavalry at the wings. His officers once again advised him to arrange the fleet in this manner, but after already deploying this way, he changed his mind and ordered them to form a hollow square. Exhausted, soldiers then marched back and forth across the field, going from one formation to another. It was then time for battle. The Parthians began the battle with a charge. Roman experience really showed for Crassus' army as they managed to fight off this attack. They then were met with a flurry of arrows from the Parthian horse archers. Not too concerned, his men held their formation and thought that if they just weathered the storm, the horse archers would soon run out of arrows, and that would create an opportunity for them to retaliate. Cyrenius, the Parthian general, on the other hand, had organized a fleet of 1,000 pack camels, each of them with fresh ammunition that was being carted back and forth to the horse archers. This continuous stream of arrows had an unnerving ability to pierce the armor of the Roman army. The casualties were mounting. As a last-ditch effort, Crassus decided to mount a breakout assault. The group led by his son, Publius, was soon in trouble, and they met with a bloody... I'm just going to pause there for a second. With a name like Publius, there's absolutely no way in hell that you're going to win a battle. I don't know what he was thinking naming his son that. Eventually, Publius lost the battle, and his head, which was soon put on a stake to taunt Crassus. With his army decimated, Crassus retreated back to the town of Carrhae after nightfall, leaving behind thousands of still alive soldiers on the battlefield. Not having enough food to last the siege, he was forced to meet with Cyrenius to discuss terms of a surrender. A scuffle broke out during this meeting. Crassus and his men were killed. Of the 43,000 men that went into battle, only a few thousand made it home. Of the 10,000 men that went into battle from the Parthian army, only 1,000 were lost. There were 4 instances where Crassus decided to go against the judgment of the people that he surrounded himself with. He failed to heed their advice, and so he lost the battle and his life. He was defeated by Cyrenius' cunning use of the technology at the time, the pack camel and the double-loading bow. This technology was available to the Roman Empire. However, it was Cyrenius' ability that revolutionized it and used it in a way that helped him win that war. A few years ago, I was a part of a restructure at our organization that resulted in units forming instead of around your specific functions, rather around your business focus. It was certainly the right call for our business, and it was time for us to breathe new life into the organization. I headed up an area that took a slightly longer part to defining how we were going to work. We preferred engagement from people to understand how we function. We involved people from around the organization just to get feedback and discuss overcoming some of the challenges that we've experienced in years past. We then put these solutions to practice. There was, however, one solution that I was close to. We called it societies. It was an attempt to hold on to the strength that having us structured around our functions gave us, while still allowing us to focus on our business. I had tremendous belief in our people's ability to be able to pull this off. However, I ignored the feedback of my leadership team within the space. They urged me to get involved in the functioning of societies and provide some direction for the groups. I didn't. I believed that a self-managed process would be the best chance societies had at succeeding. Totally oblivious to the fact that societies themselves were crying out for some leadership intervention. Needless to say, societies were a failure. There were pockets of excellence where it worked for small groups of people. However, the majority of the societies set up back then failed. They fizzled without even getting close to the hopes that I had. Had I listened to the people around me, together, we may have made a success of a noble idea. A basic lesson is use the right tool for the job, but make sure that the tool has been designed by the people around you. Know your abilities and strengths, but more importantly, the strengths of the people around you, and use that as your decision-making compass. Cyrenius' use of the technology at the time overcame the seemingly impossible task ahead of him. Had I used the people around me, we at Terrifico may have had a different outcome to this initiative. The next strong lady that I want to point at, ooh, my bad, apologies, is Carmen Medina. So Carmen Medina was an analyst, and this story starts back when she was an analyst at the CIA. She was part of the CIA during a time when intelligence was shared using physical reports that were released once a day, much like a newspaper. She believed that there was a better way. Since knowledge was changing frequently, every second counted, as each second saved lives. She believed that a real-time system was required for agencies to share information in a timeless manner. She proposed the use of their internal internet called Interlink. Her Interlink idea, however, was met with resistance at the regular CIA workgroups. These workgroups were responsible for deciding the future of the CIA and looking at new, innovative ways to improve the agency's functioning. She felt stifled. In a group that was meant to be looking ahead, they seemed stuck in the present. She was even advised by a colleague to watch what she says at these events for fear of ruining her career. But she was convinced that the same leap that the fax machine provided for immediate communication was possible with the internet. She kept pushing the do you want to take it? That's an iPhone device, by the way, an iPhone fail. She kept pushing the idea, but the resistance was unrelenting to the point that she had a massive blowout. I've had a few of those in my career. She immediately went on 3-day sick leave, and she started looking for a new job. She eventually couldn't find a new job. She got back to the CIA, and she looked for another role within the CIA that was going to take her out of the action. She eventually found that, and she stayed in that role for 3 years. At the end of that 3-year period, she eventually decided that she was going to give it another try. This idea of hers was too important to let go. The manager at the time was the main reason that she actually still stayed with the CIA. He supported this and pushed her to try and get her idea out there again. The problem with her first attempt is that the people around her didn't believe in the idea because they didn't believe in her. Carmen's lack of credibility was her issue. The CIA's culture of fear and a lack of respect was the other issue. She overcame both in her second attempt. She decided to use the people around her. She started a blog on the CIA's internal internet. She worked hard at communicating the idea regularly to the people around her. She even opened up the blog to others who in turn started using it to share a similar idea across the agency. This was totally unheard of in the intelligence community. This started to remove the fear inherent at the heart of that culture. It also caused managers to no longer seek out permission from their superiors to use this as a communication tool to do their jobs better. They just used it. 3 years after her renewed attempt, there were more than 4,000 updates a day being done on what was called Intellipedia. She succeeded in bringing the CIA into the 21st century. Now, the technology already existed when she first attempted to bring this in. And the mechanisms by which to put it in place also existed within the CIA. But it took a strong woman in Carmen to make the technology really powerful, hopefully pointing out that people are the real power behind technology. It didn't take Carmen long to be promoted to an even greater responsibility at the CIA, ending her career as an executive director there. Some of the lessons I've learned when going through Medina's story was that a culture of mutual respect is non-negotiable. It provides opportunities for people to learn and for the organization to grow. When there is respect, people speak up. In these types of environments, people believe their actions matter. Quite a few years ago, I was a newly placed software development manager, as Andrew pointed out. Just as a side note, before I forget, when you see Andrew, please just give him a thumbs up. Yeah. We had recently rolled out a new product, but with a fatal flaw. This resulted in a user experience that was totally broken. It risked ruining the hard work that people had put into a new innovative idea for the last 2 years. We had to act. It was 2 a.m. when I received the call. The developer that was in charge of the main development lived 30 minutes away from my house in the opposite direction to the office. Now, for us in Durban, that might as well be a whole new country. I might as well just break up my passport and off I go. Now, this developer didn't have a car or a license. He was also single. You know why. I got in my car and drove to his place. I picked him up, And during the hour-long drive back to the office, we brainstormed a few ideas about what the potential issue could be, how we could repair it, what we would need, and how we missed it. When we got to the office, there were a few more people waiting for us, all waiting to help us get this issue resolved as quickly as possible. We worked relentlessly, only managing to get home later that morning. This was the culture of commitment reflected in Medina's story. This commitment displayed by people that believe their actions make a difference. I believed my actions made a difference that night, so did everybody else that was with me. That was the culture of the organization I belonged to. In subsequent years, we lost a bit of that culture at Terrifico. The culture of fear set in, and an environment where respect was almost non-existent. This environment was the exact opposite of the environment I described earlier. People looking to blame. Nobody taking responsibility. The oddest thing that happened during this time was that we fractured our architecture. It reflected the culture that we had built. Our systems reflected the internal culture, and our customers experienced diminished. Our customer experience diminished as our identity began eroding. I'm glad to say that this culture is firmly in our rearview mirrors, but it serves as a stark reminder to create an environment that demands respect for the people around you and a healthy level of commitment. Fear must be eradicated like a cancer. Now, I don't have many heroes in my life, and I don't have any heroes in the business world, but if I did, Satya Nadella would be one of them. So I'm going to skip back. Sorry about the technical glitch. Satya. And it's not just because he's Indian, as many of you are thinking. In my opinion, his focus on renewing Microsoft's culture was the most valuable decision in Microsoft's history. Doubling the share price in his first 3 years was an amazing and unexpected feat. He goes to great lengths to point out that at the heart of that wasn't the technology, it was the people. The people of Microsoft that worked together to create that future. And Satya knew that when he embarked on the journey, that the focus on empathy to reinvigorate Microsoft was meant to be his main driving point. I'd say that he succeeded. I'll attempt to recount a story from Satya's book, Hit Refresh, about his first foray into an unknown. In 2008, he was asked to head up a team that was responsible for the Bing product. Anybody here use Bing as their search engine? Nobody. There's a couple of people. Yeah. That's the default install, by the way. Yeah. Now, most people don't even know what Bing is. Obviously, there's a couple here, but the rest of you are using a different browser. But for Satya, this was his first step into one of the most important contributors to Microsoft's future. He recalled visiting the office in Block 88 in the early hours of the evening before being asked to head it up. There, he was met with a parking lot full of cars, with teams spending their evening still coding with pizzas on their desk while working on their budding search engine. The energy in the room was evident. The commitment and passion the team was showing for a product that was extremely late to the search engine party was palpable. He went back to Barmer at the time and said, yes, I'll do it. There was no going back. If this failed, it might have spelled the end for Satya's career. However, this was to be his proving ground. The knowledge gained about the cloud while working on Bing was invaluable. It set Satya up for his next move, which would happen a few years later. He then moved on to Microsoft's cloud business. The lessons he learned while working on Bing, Microsoft's first distributed cloud application, were the foundation needed for him to make a success of their attempt at a cloud business. Now, they were extremely late to the party. Amazon had already eaten up the entire environment. They were making billions a year. However, the team he had was stuck in the old Microsoft way of doing things. Microsoft was a server business. That was their cash cow. To make matters worse, many of his team members believed that they should have got the job that he was now sitting in. This wasn't going to be an easy task. He had to convince the team that the selling of server technology was slowly becoming an obsolete task, and that the move to the cloud-hosted solutions was the way of the future. Once again, how? How does he convince a group of technical people that love their product that Microsoft's long-running cash cow was going to be abandoned? He could have easily uprooted this entire team and brought in his team from Bing, a team with a track record that he's got a good working relationship with, a team that already had a head start in cloud technology. Instead, Satya dedicated his time to one of his main cultural focus areas, empathy. He met with each individual of the team multiple times to explain his vision and what Microsoft's vision should be, to listen to their take on it and how they should adjust it, to talk about possible futures, to discuss ways in which they could make this business work and make sure that they caught up from far behind. What they decided as a team was to introduce a hybrid model to ensure that their existing customer base would be taken care of and that they would be a part of their partner's journey into the cloud. Existing on-premise cloud services with ring-fence cloud technology hosted at data centers was the solution. And so finally, Azure made its mark in the cloud world. They turned Microsoft's cloud business from $1 million business a year to a $1 billion business a year. The lesson to take away from the story is best summed up with a quote from Satya himself. Any transformation that is to stick must come from within. After taking the reins at Terrifico last March, unaware of the story from Satya, this was the path I took. I knew that the only way in which I could turn our ship and ready our people for the path ahead was with their engagement. It was many a long month, and at times I must admit that my faith wavered, but I stayed the course. More importantly, I had an entire group of people behind me keeping me on track. A lot of them sitting in this group today. I started meeting with people in the organization regularly. Feedback was encouraged. We pushed for open, honest, and transparent conversation. And slowly but surely, we all started to believe that we could turn this around. Believe that there is a chance that we could find our culture again, rebuild our core. I regularly held sessions called Ask. It was an opportunity for people to throw any question at me, ask about the organization, where our business is going, or about some of the challenges that they faced. It was also an opportunity for me to get feedback from them about the things that they want to change at the organization, about some of the concerns that they had. It was at my first Ask session that a young developer, whom I'd known for a while, decided that he would take the plunge and ask a question that had been in his mind for a while. It went something like this. Quraish, you were promoted to take charge of an area of the business a few years ago where you set out to achieve a number of things. He was referring to the restructure I spoke about earlier, where we'd used a number of people throughout the organization to decide how we would function. You haven't achieved all of them, and yet you were promoted to CEO. Do you believe you should have been promoted, was his question. There was an audible gasp in the room. Some of it might have been me. I could see the apprehension from everyone in this space. The tension was palpable. I could touch it. The thing that this gent didn't realize is that what he had inadvertently done was kicked off our new culture drive. He had set the foundation for which we needed to proceed. I must admit that when I asked for candor at these sessions, I wasn't prepared for that type of question. My response was totally irrelevant because the outcome was what we exactly needed. But here was another lesson taught to me. Expect the unexpected. Thanks, Kamal, or as we call him now, Cappy. I struggle to recall my exact answer. Sorry, apologies. And so it was that my journey so far has been not a success because of myself, but because of the people that surrounded me. Kamal being a good example of that. I'm helped in my journey by the people that surround me and have been taught some of the most valuable lessons in my life. He was ridiculed for a number of months thereafter. I did crack a joke about him being fired. He did take me seriously. I was tempted to move his car every now and then, so he would know that he was kicked out of the business. But he still remains a very successful developer at our organization. But this was the first time in a long time our company, our family, was talking honestly. I want to leave you with two thoughts. So firstly, there are two types of people in the world. The first type of person is the person that has an iPhone. The second type of person is the person that is going to have an iPhone. I'm just kidding, I'm kidding. I'm sure I'm going to convert to an Android at some point. But the important thought that I want to leave you with is that the only way an organization will achieve great things is if the people in the organization are great themselves. This requires putting people first. It is the mantra that I drive. It is the ethos of our organization. And for those of you that don't belong to Terrifico, that put your hands up at the beginning of this talk, I'm sure it's the same for you. After all, the real power of tech is people. Thank you. So as you can tell, I'm not great at prepared speeches to try and kind of go through a whole topic and take you guys through a number of things. So I wanted to end this slightly differently, if you'll humor me. And Terrifico guys, you're welcome to ask questions, but you see me all the time. So I'm hoping that I'm going to hear from the rest of the crowd. Would you guys mind if we did a little bit of a DevConf ask? There's a Twitter handle, like Andrew said before, and hopefully you guys have sent a couple of questions through to that, so I'd like to respond to some of the questions. Would that be okay?
I duffed the Twitter information.
Was it because of your thumb?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So this is a series of very unfortunate events and bad decisions that resulted in this injury. So there's a Twitter handle. It's @Terrifico. If anybody wants to get on that, and if you have any questions, we can post it. Otherwise, we can run around. The Terrifico guys have had the handle for a little bit, so I think there might be 1 or 2 questions already in the pipeline.
Okay, cool.
But if you guys can make an effort and stick a question on there, that would be great. I'm going to check in now. Hopefully there's one. Incoming. This is a hard one. What makes Terrifico a great company?
Wow.
You can pitch it to without fear.
Look, I mean, Terrifico is a great company, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other great companies throughout the entire country. I think some of their names are up on these banners. I think some of you that are in the crowd also work for fantastic organizations. I think the one thing that is unique about Terrifico, though, is that we're a software development company, for that being our main business, meaning we sell software product. That is how we make our money. That is the service that we deliver. We don't necessarily provide software as an enablement function for back office for companies to thrive. I hope I'm making sense. So that's one of the things that I think is unique about Terrifico, and is one of the reasons that I enjoy working at the organization, because the technical challenges that we face are always difficult, and we're constantly forging new avenues to try and do things differently. So that I enjoy. The other thing is the thing that I talk about all the time. It's the people at the organization. I've been fortunate enough to be surrounded by people that are extremely smart, most of them a lot smarter than I am, which is why they gave me this role and left them up to actually building the business. And they're extremely knowledgeable. There's always an opportunity to learn, and that's something that I really enjoy about the company. So those are probably my 2 highlights.
Cool. Here's another one that's come through. What do you do if your leader doesn't want to listen at all?
Well, doesn't want to listen at all. There's actually a 4-stage model for that type of scenario. And I'll try and remember the keywords. But there were 2 main ones that I'm familiar with because I read a lot about those items. But the one is stay, and the other one is leave. So if your manager isn't necessarily listening to you, you've got 2 options. The one, which is stay, focuses on an internal locus of control. I am going to take control of this particular situation, and I'm going to drive for a specific outcome. If your manager doesn't agree with you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're being a D-bag. It just maybe means that your idea is not well thought out, or that there's more information that's required for them to drive the point home. I'm assuming, though, in this instance, it's the latter, the D-bag situation, yeah? And if that is your situation, we get to the other one. Again, an internal locus of control, meaning you are in charge of that situation. Leave is the other option. Life is too short for you to spend your time working on something that you love doing every day in an environment where you hate doing it. If you're spending 8 hours of your day on something that you're good at, working in an environment where you're supported and helped by your leaders in that space to make you great is going to make you even better. Go for that. Don't sit around in an area where you don't believe that you're going to make a difference. So my advice would be, pick one of those 2 items. I'll recount a story. So every organization, Terrifico included, is met with politics. It exists for a reason in a number of spaces, and sometimes when politics works, it actually aids the organization in achieving an objective. Having multiple agendas is an important thing because it causes us to question the ideas of others, to make sure that we've closed all the holes. But when politics is self-serving, it hurts a company and the people around it. Now, I was in a leadership position at Terrifico, in a space with other leaders beside me, in an executive team that was focused purely on selfish agendas, our own internal path, not focused on working together and pulling together to try and drive an organizational norm. Now, that type of environment makes it extremely difficult for anybody to thrive and grow. I've spoken about it in this prepared speech that I fumbled through. But that's an extremely toxic space to be in. Now, I had two choices at a point in time when things came to a head. It was evident at the time that some of my peers thought that I should not be a part of the team. It was also evident that some of my peers thought that I should be a part of the team. It was evident to me that I thought I had the right path for us to take for our company to become great again. Now, the guys that thought that I should leave didn't buy that plan. At that point, I had to make a choice, stay or leave. I chose to stay because of the people that I work with. It wasn't just that executive team. It's the people sitting in the crowd with the black T-shirts on here. It's people sitting in Durban and across the world that have worked so hard, despite our failings as leaders, to still make us a great company. I owed it to them to make sure that we saw this through, and I owed it to them to try and right the wrongs that I was a part of in my career at Terrifico. Now, that was a choice to stay. Equally, I had a choice to leave. At the time, it was just pure coincidence. I had 2 job offers on the table. 2 of them that were really good. They offered me more money than I was earning at Terrifico, so cash-wise, that wasn't going to be an issue. They also offered me what was seemingly a good role because it had some autonomy to try and allow me the space to flex my wings and fly to a new path. But I still owed a debt to Terrifico. And when I weigh those 2 opportunities up, the debt to the people of Terrifico that have helped me learn all those lessons, that have taught me so many life lessons that I use now in my private life, I had to make sure that I backed those people. Because when it was time to back me, they all did it unflinchingly. You still have those 2 opportunities. There's 2 more. I don't pay attention to them. Just go check it up. I'm sure you'll find it on Google. Or Bing, if that's your preference. Yeah.
Okay, this is from Andres. Do you experience a decrease in culture with an increase in the size of a company?
Yes, without a doubt. That's a great question. Without a doubt. The larger you get, the harder it is to hold on to that thing that's intangible that makes you unique as an organization. The difference is that as we grow, and especially when we start from a smaller organization, we tend to take that for granted. The way in which we work, how we react to things, the fact that we support each other and how we engage, we take that for absolute granted. And we assume that when people come in, they will experience that type of culture and as a result understand it and then start behaving in a similar manner. Now that's not always true. We tend to fall into the trap of just letting it play out the way that it needs to play out. Again, I've been a part of this a number of times at Terrifico through the changes that we've experienced over the last few decades. The way to overcome this, though, is to make sure that it becomes your main focal point. It needs to be the thing that underpins every decision that you make. Making a call for a KPI, increase our revenue by 5%, focus on reducing our cost base by 50%. Any of those items in isolation will fail. I believe that you can see it all the time. The latest news headlines, I think it was Alexander Forbes, killing their insurance business, their retail insurance business. A 1 billion rand project that they put out 3 years ago to try and build software to be able to deliver services to the retail environment, the rest of us. They got 340 million in, and they called it quits. The CEO left, I think he was asked to leave, and a new CEO has taken that place, and they're now canning that portion of their business. Now, those types of mistakes are made often in large business. But the reason that I think that they're made is that they don't focus on the culture of trying to make sure that every individual is pulling in the same direction, that they understand the vision of the organization. They understand their responsibility and what the expectation is for their contribution to the culture. And that's something that you have to invest in all the time. Go back to the KPI, increase revenue by 10%. Increasing our revenue by 10%, creating more insight into that particular number, ensuring that people understand how we want to do it, not by trampling over each other, not by screwing each other over just to get the one up so I get the big bonus when the revenue does hit that target, but rather by working together so that that target itself becomes irrelevant. And how you work together can be repeated over and over again to continue to make you a successful organization. That's what I believe you should be doing to get your culture ingrained as you grow. Hopefully that answers.
I think this is probably the last one. What led you to become a leader? This is from Graham.
What led me to become a leader? I think I was so bad at software development at Terrifico that they asked me to become a manager. I've always been drawn to trying to work with people. I think I first experienced it when I became a senior software developer. And when I stepped into that role, I made the exact same mistakes that I think a lot of us have made in our career. We focus predominantly on coding. We think that being senior means that I need to code more, larger volumes. Now I'm senior, I've taken one step up. I used to code 60,000 lines a day. It's crazy. Now I need to code 80,000 lines of code a day. That was the path that I took. And slowly I realized that I was becoming less and less effective. I was working longer hours, I was trying to put a lot more effort into things, I was making a whole bunch of mistakes along the way. Until I started leveraging the people around me, and I learned new ways of doing things. I started trying to rally the troops whenever we were running into small problems. What being senior was about pulling people together and trying to get them to leverage their skills and work together to achieve a central goal. And I started learning that lesson as time went on. As I progressed in my career as a developer, that became more and more relevant. I found that I wasn't the smartest person in the room. I didn't have all of the answers. I maybe poked holes in a couple of the things that came along, but equally, I was the guy that created an opportunity for people to have a platform to voice their opinion and find the right solutions together. After doing that, I looked at our leadership and realized that if I really wanted to solve the problem and I really wanted to be a part of the culture, I need to step into a leadership role to try and take those reins and drive it down that path. I started just as a simple team leader of a new product, which is where Andrew and I met. He was the customer, a pain-in-the-ass customer at the time, but he and I worked really closely together to try and drive a product, and we made a success of it. But more importantly, the people in that team who were seemingly the outcasts at Terrifico on a product that nobody had faith in, suddenly started working together. And we actually created a very successful product that ran for years. One of the ones that's probably going to be a new niche for us in the next little while. So that was why I decided to step into leadership. I believe that I should be making a bigger difference. And I wanted to make sure that I gave back to the company that helped me get to that point. And my time's up. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, guys.